From magnificent monuments to towering temples, the relics of mighty civilizations give us tantalizing glimpses of the glories of the past. These ancient stones have been slow to give up their secrets. The clues to the lives that once flourished here lie buried or eroded by the passage of time. But now, the skills of scientists and historians have brought us fresh insight into the past. New understanding enables us to gaze back through the centuries at these dazzling societies and bring their lost worlds to life. Every society has secrets, but some are special. The great mysteries of life have an extra potency if only a few are deemed worthy to share them. In the ancient world, religion and ritual often went hand in hand with the exercise of power. Knowledge was a privilege closely guarded. The art of concealment is an old one. Yet in the long run, it rarely completely succeeds. Whether through accidents of nature or the hand of fate, in the end, secrets find their way out. More than 4,000 years ago, the serenely beautiful Mediterranean islands of Santorini and Crete were the home of one of the most brilliant yet enigmatic of lost civilizations. These islands, nestling in the Aegean Sea, were the cradle of one of the great classic civilizations of the Mediterranean, the Minoans. Yet much about them remains mysterious. What we do know is that the Minoans created exciting, spectacular art. One image stands out: their most potent cultural symbol, the bull. This carving, one of the most magnificent, was found at the Palace of Knossos, the Minoans' ancient capital city. It's just one of hundreds of bull images found at the site.
The bull seems to have been a very important image in Cretan art. We don't fully understand the significance of this animal, but it does seem to have played an important role in religious practices, as the imagery particularly shows us. A lot of the bull imagery that we have actually comes from Knossos, and that has encouraged people to wonder whether the bull was used as a symbol of power to represent the authority, particularly of the elite at this palace.
At Knossos, the bull was more than a passive symbol. Palace frescoes show animals and humans taking part in an extraordinary ritual. In a death-defying demonstration of courage and skill, young Minoan men pitted themselves against full-grown bulls. Much in Minoan culture reflects the central importance of the bull. It's the theme of one of the most celebrated of Cretan legends. The story tells how the gods put a spell on the Queen of Crete to make her fall in love with a bull. The result of their union, a creature half man and half bull, was known as the Minotaur. According to myth, the monster lived in a labyrinth and demanded human sacrifices each year. Finally, he was slaughtered by the hero Theseus. The story describes how the bull is overcome by humans, just as it is tamed in Minoan art. It's almost as if the Minoans are symbolizing their victory over brutish instincts. Something in which, on the surface at least, they seem to have succeeded. There are no images of war or battle to be found. The only hint of fighting is boxing. Like bull leaping, a ritualized form of aggression. Among this wealth of art, weapons and warriors simply don't exist. This is so unusual that archaeologists began to wonder if the Minoan was the only civilization in history to have embraced an entirely peaceful existence. It certainly looked that way. Their artistic legacy points to a pastoral idyll. The people we see are fishermen or farmers. Everything on display portrays a prosperous, settled society. Their islands were fertile and their people industrious. They were traders too, their merchant ships dealing in copper, pottery, gold, and precious stones, as well as olive oil and timber. Their efforts were well rewarded. The Minoans were successful and wealthy, especially the small group who controlled the trade and dominated society. Their frescoes faithfully record an elegant, luxurious lifestyle, dedicated to the cultivation of beauty and the arts.
We're dealing often with very opulent elites with extravagant prestige artifacts, extravagant costumes, and on top of that we've got very good evidence for the types of jewellery that they were wearing. Finger rings, seal rings perhaps strapped around the wrist, necklaces, earrings, hair ornaments, which were very elaborate and usually comprised of very valuable materials.
The Minoan pleasure in adornment extended to their dwellings. Their houses and palaces were exceptional. One of the most stunning was Knossos, their royal complex situated on the island of Crete. Built in 1700 BC, it covers an area of over 20,000 square meters. It was carefully designed, a mixture of monumental structures and imposing public spaces. This was a city built to celebrate a privileged culture. Its wide walkways, elegant columns, and striking architecture speaking of wealth and sophistication. Looking at all of this, it's hard to remember that Knossos was created at a time when many other cultures were still emerging from the Stone Age. Their technological skills were extraordinary. They used their knowledge of water pressure to build drainage and irrigation systems. They were ingenious engineers, their multi-story buildings dominated by imposing staircases and massive columns. In the throne room of the palace, natural pigments were used to color vivid frescoes that have endured for nearly 4,000 years. The artwork is a unique record, providing a revealing account of Minoan society. One of the most striking impressions is the extent to which women dominate each scene. The frescoes are filled with female images. They're shown taking an active part in everything from administration to metalwork, and especially in ceremonies.
We have a lot of images depicting religious ritual activities, and females are prominent in many of them. And this suggests to us that elite females, at least, did play a prominent role in religious life.
And these rituals were important, part of what held the society together.
Convincing people that the social order that exists is the natural way of things, is the desirable way of things, is a very important mechanism for control. And religion lends itself very nicely to this form of control.
Even the gods themselves were female, the snake goddess just one of many. Minoans believed that human fate rested in the hands of their gods. They could influence everything from crop failure to earthquakes. Appeasing them was a daily task. It's tempting to attribute the peaceful nature of Minoan society to the influence of women. It looked as if female power had cancelled out the more brutal aspects of human nature and created a gentle, non-violent culture. But as more Minoan cities were excavated, archaeologists discovered that not everything was quite as it appeared. The Minoans had a secret, and it wasn't featured on their beautiful frescoes and murals. Hidden under this mountainside at Anamospilia, a subterranean building holds a sinister surprise. Buried within the remains of a small crypt, archaeologists unearthed human remains, covered in debris. The victims had apparently been crushed during one of the earthquakes that plague the area to this day. But were all these deaths accidental? What were these people doing in the crypt? Detailed excavation established what was happening here when the earthquake struck, and revealed a disturbing fact. The young man was killed before the earthquake. Evidence showed this had been murder. Moreover, he had been a victim of ritual human sacrifice. As the ceremony ended, the earthquake struck. Burying them all in a moment frozen in time. The discovery raised new questions about our understanding of the Minoans. Was this an isolated event? Or was human sacrifice really at the heart of this apparently gentle people's religion? Another underground room, this time at the Palace of Knossos, brought the answer. In this room, lay the skeletons of 4 children. Their bones had been cut with a knife and their flesh removed. They too had been the victims of a sacrifice. Their lives offered to appease a demanding God. As excavation continued, more of these secluded, less public areas came to light. Many of the images depicted sacrifice, although they showed animals as victims. The central figure in all the ceremonies was a woman, a priestess presiding over the rites. Sacrifices were not public. Only the priestesses were admitted. Human sacrifice, the most powerful ritual of them all, was even more closely guarded. Hidden away in the mountains or underground crypts. Why were these ceremonies so secret when they were believed to be so vital? And how did the apparently non-violent ethos of Minoan culture relate to these brutal acts? Anthropologists have found that where sacrifice is believed to be a way of making contact with the gods, the ceremony is considered both powerful and dangerous. The more extreme the sacrifice, the more potent, and the more access to it is restricted. Such rituals are usually open only to an initiated few, those whose knowledge protects them from the perils of this hotline to the deities. Members of the religious elite perform these rites on behalf of the whole society. Others may be aware of the nature of the rituals, but lack the secret knowledge to perform them. Minoan women would have gained considerable political status from their monopoly of this, the ultimate form of communication with their goddesses. Perhaps this power enabled them to impose the more non-violent ideals that characterize the rest of their society. It's a paradox that the Minoans may well have owed their non-violent idyll to the existence of this most brutal of acts. The Minoans' heyday was fated not to last. Around 1600 BC, more earthquakes throughout the islands were followed by a massive volcanic eruption on Santorini. The Minoans, surrounded by the destruction of their homes and farms, became vulnerable. In the following years, they were attacked by invaders, gradually losing their independence as power shifted towards the mainland. War raged across the Aegean. The idyll of the Minoans, with all its contradictions, faded into history. The centuries that followed saw the rise of another society where women were the keepers of secrets, but where their role was very different. The Roman Empire was founded on military discipline. Its society, too, was carefully regimented, and conformity was enforced. It was a society ripe for the breeding of secrets. In 79 AD, the Roman writer Pliny the Younger described the area around Pompeii, nestling in the Bay of Naples, as the loveliest region of the earth. Before long, this landscape was to more closely resemble one of the circles of hell. On the morning of August the 24th, 79 AD, the nearby volcano, Vesuvius, erupted. In a series of explosive outbursts, the volcano released millions of tons of hot ash and rock. Most of the townspeople were caught unawares in an apocalyptic nightmare. The city and its hapless citizens vanished beneath several meters of volcanic ash, where they remained for almost 2,000 years. But in 1748, archaeologists began to excavate the buried city. They made casts of the victims, whose shape had been faithfully preserved by the ash that solidified around their dying bodies. Protected from the ravages of time by its volcanic blanket, the city had remained virtually unchanged since that terrible August day. No other Roman remains come down to us like this, frozen in time. Pompeii's prosperity was based on trade and tourism. Goods passed through the port on their way to the capital. Many Romans had second homes here, and there was always a supply of foreign visitors, lured by the pleasure-seeking holiday lifestyle for which Pompeii was famous. Pompeii was a city where almost anything could be bought. Wealthy residents and visitors had both the time and money to pursue the pleasures of the flesh. And Pompeii's bars were popular places to seek entertainment. Here the wine flowed, and additional entertainment could be provided by slaves and prostitutes. Many taverns and inns had rooms decorated with erotic images for those in need of privacy. With more than 20 such houses already discovered, it seems that Pompeii's reputation for drunken debauchery was well deserved. But these excesses took place against a backdrop of a tightly structured society. This was a time when everyone knew their place. The social order was clear, but not inflexible. Successful men could climb the social ladder, and even slaves could gain their freedom and become citizens. There was only one group whose status, determined at birth, could not be altered. Women, whether rich or poor, were always unequal. For them, the liberated lives of the Minoan women were an impossible dream.
In our terms, women in Rome, like anywhere in the ancient world, had a pretty grim life. Women had no formal part in public life. They had no right to vote. Their main duties were domestic, in the home, and having babies.
Unmarried women were confined within the household and expected to marry. They then passed from the control of their father to that of their husband. Many women in Pompeii were considered little more than chattels. Upper-class women fared best. They were educated and could own property. Many exercised power indirectly by influencing their families. But even they were largely confined to the house and obliged to obey their husbands. The woman's role was clear: to be a devoted wife and mother. The empire needed new Romans, and it was a woman's job to provide them. The ideal feminine virtues were loyalty, chastity, dignity, and modesty, and were expected of all women, whatever their circumstances. It was a circumscribed life with no prospect of change. It's possible that women throughout Roman society accepted their role and looked no further. But in Pompeii, at least, things were not quite as straightforward as they seemed. This building, just outside Pompeii, is called the Villa of the Mysteries. When it was uncovered, it yielded some surprises. At first sight, it looks just like the elegant home of any local landowner. Its many rooms open out onto a central courtyard, where once a fountain would have played. The airy terraces were perfect for enjoying the cool of the evening. But on one side of the building, there is something you wouldn't expect of a normal Roman villa. The walls of this room are covered with vivid, beautifully executed frescoes. They show Roman women taking part in a religious ceremony. The scenes are detailed. It's clear that this is a room dedicated to the activities of a cult. The images on the walls take the form of a narrative. They apparently describe the initiation of a young woman. The story begins with a woman entering the room bearing offerings of food. A priestess removes a covering from a ceremonial basket. She's surrounded by mythological characters playing music. As the figures look on, the woman moves closer to the heart of the ritual. In the center of the room is the powerful image of a figure sprawled in the arms of a woman. It's the figure of the god Dionysus. Dionysus was the Greek god of wine, fertility, and ecstasy, an important figure in Greek mythology and often associated with women's activities. Openly worshipped by the Greeks, among the Romans he was considered a foreign god. But that may have helped, not hindered, his popularity.
Foreign cults were extremely important in Rome. And cults which are constructed in a different way from ordinary Roman religion. Ordinary Roman worship is done openly. Everyone processes together openly to the temple, and it's an act of the community. What's distinctive about the foreign cults is that they may be specific groups of initiates, groups of people worshipping together to the exclusion of the rest of the community.
The Roman followers of Dionysus may have been a minority, but they were to prove a troublesome one. Their group, dedicated to sensual enjoyment, acquired a reputation for flagrant licentiousness that threatened to get out of control.
It caused enormous anxiety, and specifically in 186 BC, there was an attempt to stamp out the worship of Bacchus, of Dionysus, in Italy. And there's virtual panic in Rome. Stories are told about how they form these close associations, and women are involved in these orgiastic cults, and they persuade people to make over their property, young, innocent people persuaded to make over their property. And it's seen as an enormous threat.
The Roman Senate went so far as to ban the cult of Dionysus, and they were serious about eradicating it. Priestesses were accused of working against the empire. Cult members were imprisoned, and the most resistant even condemned to death. But in Pompeii in 79 AD, it seems that the cult was alive and well. Women were still gathering to take part in Dionysian rituals, and they were taking a considerable risk to do so. What was it that made the cult so attractive to women?
One of the things that most marked out Dionysus was his association not just with the foreign, but with the wild. Dionysus partly belonged in that wild area where people got drunk, where women started behaving ecstatically, where men were outrageously sexualized, and so on. One of the reasons that Dionysus appealed to women is that the kind of freedom that he represented from traditional constraints probably was very attractive to people whose lives were so controlled by their menfolk.
Within the domestic sphere, wildness and abandon were not options for Roman women. Open rebellion against their powerlessness could only worsen their predicament. Did the cult of Dionysus offer an escape, at least temporarily, from this life of obedience?
Women who are otherwise repressed and constrained in their day-to-day life found in this cult something that they could participate in with greater freedom, with greater autonomy, and with greater power. That to be a priestess of Dionysus might have given women something which they didn't get from daily life back at home.
Here in the Villa of the Mysteries was a hidden place where believers could meet as equals, free to act as they wished. The constraints of their roles as obedient wives and mothers could be left behind. In addition, secrecy and danger would serve to strengthen the ties between the members. We do not know how widespread Dionysus worship was, but this secret society may have provided a service to Rome, a safety valve for women, an outlet that allowed them to continue with the subservient domestic role that was seen as so vital to the continued success of the empire. Secrecy in Pompeii played an important role for an otherwise powerless group, but in other ancient cultures, secrecy could come perilously close to deception among the most powerful strata of society. Emerging from the dense tropical forests of Guatemala, these are the remnants of a great New World civilization, the Maya. One of its major centers was Tikal, meaning place of voices. In the 6th century AD, Tikal was a major center of commerce and culture. About 75,000 people are thought to have lived in and around the city. The complex is dominated by 6 imposing pyramids, one of which is the tallest structure built here in the pre-Columbian era. Surrounding it are the remains of as many as 3,000 dwellings and public buildings. Tikal was a busy place.
There were a variety of activities going on. People would be coming in for the market, coming in for various kinds of bureaucratic reasons. Probably elite children would be going to school in these areas. And then, of course, there would be the ceremonial occasions, which we think were pretty frequent and would have brought large numbers of people into the center.
At the height of its power, the Mayan Empire covered a major part of what is now Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, and Central America as far as El Salvador and Honduras. For more than 1,000 years, they dominated the region, imposing their rule through extended campaigns of war and conquest. Yet the Maya were not simply warriors. They were among the most sophisticated thinkers in the ancient Americas. They wrote and illustrated books, conceived the idea of eternity, and in mathematics, they developed the concept of zero. Their astronomical calculations were so precise that they could even predict eclipses. They developed a yearly calendar, but also had a shorter, sacred one that governed religious life, and created 2 cog-like wheels to integrate them. The notion of time and its calculation was part of their religion. They believed that time itself was divine and had no beginning or end. But they saw it as divided into periods, each with its own god. Almost uniquely, the Maya worshipped time. Yet the Maya had a less abstract side to their spiritual life. These time gods demanded sacrifice, and they demanded it in blood. The Maya played a ball game, although play is not an entirely accurate description. The game took place on a rectangular court, bordered by angled walls. At each end were stone rings. There were 2 teams, and the ball was large and heavy. Made from latex from the surrounding forest, these were the first ever rubber balls. Because of their weight and bounce, the game was dangerous. The ball rebounded from the sloping walls. Serious injuries and even death were not uncommon, despite the padding worn by the players. The object was to get the ball through one of the rings, but the rules made this far from easy. Players are thought not to have been able to touch the ball with either hands or feet. Yet the players had a very strong incentive, for this was a game of life and death. In Mayan religious belief, the gods had competed on the court to decide which of them should be sacrificed in order to create the Mayan people. This death, the Mayans believed, had brought their people into being, a debt that must constantly be repaid in human blood.
In this kind of cosmological context, we think that kings sometimes reenacted these celestial battles and would sometimes, we think, have staged ball games against captive or captured enemies. And then those captured enemies would probably be sacrificed, which again ties into the Maya origin myth where sacrifices are associated with the ball game.
The theme of blood sacrifice runs strongly through Mayan culture. Without it, they believed, the very existence of the Maya would be jeopardized. Satisfying the gods was so vital that the king himself was required to take part. In the public spaces around the awe-inspiring pyramids, the people would gather to witness one of their most important rituals. For on this day, the blood to be shed was that of the king. This is when the magnificent central pyramid came into its own. The king, in ceremonial dress and accompanied by his high priests, greeted his people from the pyramid's summit, high above the crowds. It was the signal for a flamboyant overture of drums and fire. With the chanting and drums reaching a frenzied climax, the priest reached out and pierced the body of the ruler. As the royal blood flowed, a rope was passed through the wound to collect it. Spattered onto bark paper, the king's blood was ceremonially burned. As the blood and paper burned, the priests looked for visions in the rising smoke. This was the crowning moment of the ceremony, the time when the Mayas' communication with their gods was most complete. The king was not required to give up his life, but he must endure pain and the loss of his blood at the hands of his priests.
We know that they were burning incense and performing ceremonies in their houses, ordinary farmers. But the king was much higher up the social scale, making a much more public proclamation of this relationship to the gods, and clearly saying, we all have our role to play in keeping the system moving, the cosmos moving, but I'm more important than the average person in keeping that system going.
This dramatic public display not only proved the king's courage and commitment, it underlined his power. Only his blood was enough to satisfy the gods. With the thrill of the ritual over, carved images acted as constant reminders of the king's sacrifice. The pictures, placed in numerous public places, graphically portrayed the ruler's pain and mutilation.
The art that depicts bloodletting is certainly reminding the viewer that elite people, kings and queens, are committed to sustaining the gods and sustaining the social system. So certainly those religious activities and their representation do reinforce the status of powerful people.
But these images were recreations of a scene described to the artist after the event. For though this was a ceremony performed in front of thousands of people, it was not really public at all.
I think some ritual was hidden and some was private as well. If you look at the temple pyramids, the pyramids are very large, but the temples are actually quite small spaces. And so even if there was a large crowd gathered in the plaza, they wouldn't necessarily be able to see what was happening at the top of the pyramid in that temple. Probably wouldn't. And so there is a kind of mysterious element to that, sacred knowledge that only some people have. I think that's part of it.
Although thousands of people were present, no one outside the tightest court circle actually witnessed the event. Only the most select group of priests could be allowed close to something so sacred. Archaeological evidence suggests that this could have been a convenient excuse. The ceremony may not have been quite what was shown in the public images. Examination of the ceremonial knives showed that they were made of obsidian, a hard volcanic rock that could be honed to razor sharpness. In skilled hands, it would be possible to draw blood without inflicting a significant wound. And the incision was made in the tongue, which, though quick to bleed, has few nerve endings and is among the least painful areas to pierce. The royal bloodletting ceremony is likely to have been little more than an imaginative piece of theatre, in which the donating of a few drops of blood was elevated into a major sacrifice. It was a secret that only the king and his closest circle could share. For they were united in a constant battle to keep control of their vast and sprawling empire. Military might was not enough. They needed a loyal following as well.
Politics and religion in Maya society were both ways of maintaining order and reinforced each other. So the religious system provided a justification for the power of kings and other people.
But as the centuries wore on, even this elaborate system of sacrifice and subterfuge was not enough to prevent the Mayan Empire's descent into oblivion. In the 9th century, in one of the biggest historical mysteries, their civilization came to an unexplained end. There is little to tell us why this once powerful civilization came so suddenly to its close. But we know that during its decline, there was a marked falling off of religious activity. The great rituals were abandoned, and the pyramids fell silent. The king's sacrifice and the secrets that went with it were no longer required. Secrecy, it seems, has been a recurring theme in the ancient world. Secret knowledge, whether among the Minoans, the Dionysus worshippers, or the Mayan kings, was perceived as a key to power. Only the initiated could witness the most important of ceremonies. Others might know of them, but never be permitted access. In every ancient society, the truth was carefully rationed, because exclusive knowledge meant exclusive power.